Ardavan, just in general, um, we can't keep up with the chats, like if when we're talking. So are you able to kind of let us know what the responses are and things like that, like as we go through it?
Yes, Bryce and I will be moderating it,
Okay,
and
that
at
sounds
the
good.
end we'll bring up anything that we feel, we want you to respond to.
Cool.
Okay, it's 6:33. I'm just being mindful of time. Welcome everybody. We are going to begin. Thank you for making some time in your busy schedule to be here as part of this inaugural event, which is going to be a 5-part series, with the launch being Muslim in the world of basketball in Canada. I saw from the chat we have people from all over, and that is great because we want this important conversations to happen from different perspectives and lived experiences, just like our panel. Our speakers, we're not going to read their bios one by one because we do want to delve right into it, into the lived experiences. But please put the Eventbrite page into the chat. If Sally, can you put the link in the chat, please, where you can read their more thorough biographies. They all have a range of extensive experiences as players, coaches, referees, community organization and activism, and some in more than one category. So there's quite a extensive range of experience here. We have Aisha Hamai, Saif Rahman, Farhan Beg, Amreen Kadwa, and Uzman Chadri. And I'll be your moderator, Ardavan Eizadirad. So I'd like to begin with an agenda, so you know what you're expecting. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you from Toronto, known as Turtle Island, Toronto. We're going to talk a little bit briefly about the objective of the Brave Conversations, Breaking Barriers Through Brave Conversations series, and to mention that even though we're focusing on the Muslim experiences, right now we're in solidarity opposing anti-Asian racism, which is happening in the United States, here in Canada, and all over the world around the false narratives of where the COVID-19 pandemic started. So we want to be in solidarity to stand up to all forms of marginalization and oppression. We're going to define some key terms because it's important when we're talking about these terminology, so we're on the same page. And then after a little bit of theory and education and videos, we're going to really get into it with our lived experiences of our panelists. And at the end, we're going to provide you with a resource list to kind of as an extension of the discussions and the learning, and open it up for Q&A. So if you have the latest Zoom, if you go to the view on the top right corner and you go to gallery, only the 6 panelists should be on your screen. That might help you. We also ask to be conscious of Wi-Fi and equity access to technology. So if you could take your video off, it will help people who are having bandwidth problems other than our speakers, and that will help. So I want to begin by acknowledging that the land we are meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. That was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon, One Palm Belt Covenant, and an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, Toronto is the meeting place, still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory, even if it's remotely. Want to encourage you to check out that website, Whose Land. Sally, can you put that into the chat, or Bryce, who are helping organize the event? It's a web-based app that uses technology to assist users in identifying Indigenous nations, territories, and Indigenous communities all across Canada. So what is the philosophy and approach behind breaking barriers through brave conversations? It's this idea that there's no such thing as a safe space. Just because I tell you I want a safe space doesn't mean you feel safe. So we're going to start with this poem, which is an invitation to a brave space, and then briefly say, what is the difference between a safe and a brave space? So together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we all have caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to be more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space tonight won't be perfect. It'll not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. So here are kind of the ground rules. Safe space is in the safety net of what you feel safe, and we want to encourage you and push you to come out of it, to reflect, to engage in dialogue and listen without criticizing. Hear different perspectives, show up, be present, and be open to creating this experience together. Speak, listen with truth and love, and agree or disagree with respect and kindness. And at any point, if maybe some of these narratives, lived experiences, or comments rub you the wrong way, that's okay. It's important to take some time to ask yourself, why did a comment rub you the wrong way or trigger you or make you uncomfortable? This is part of challenge and emotional and spiritual labor of unlearning. And our larger goal of making sports at all levels, from grassroots to elite levels, and its culture more equitable, diverse, and inclusive. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I love to see the chat a little bit better. So I'm gonna put a challenge to you. I want you to put into the chat the name of all Muslim athletes you can think of except basketball. So athletes playing other sports, put their names into the chat. Let's see how you do. I see we start off with Muhammad Ali. We're gonna give you 30 seconds. 10 more seconds. Okay, now we are going, okay, stop please. So you missed the timeline now. So now please put into the chat the name of all Muslim basketball players you can think of, whether they're playing now or from the past. You can go as far back as you can think of. So let's see how many names you come up with. All right, wonderful. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so we're briefly going to start showing you 2 videos highlighting activism of 2 Muslim basketball athletes who committed their life and sacrificed their careers to kind of disrupt and resist stereotypical thinking about Islam in sports and who they represent. So the whole idea is to move the discussion beyond stereotypes, kind of affiliated when you think of Islam with the media representation that's often rooted in extremism and sexism, right? We want to disrupt that form of thinking, which is not really what Islam is about, and our speakers will speak about it. So we did it chronologically. Going to show you 2 3-minute clips, kind of 1996, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, and then 2017, Bilqis Abdul Qadir, whose activism led to the FIBA reversing its controversial headgear ban as of October 2017. You might know these names, you might not. So here they are. I'm going to share them. All right, and we're gonna go right into the next video just to maximize the time. This is from a larger documentary about Bilqis's life.
Trying to think how I can word it, because it's really just a feeling that I feel. Everything that I have is just 2 years ago. And in a way, you're still kind of telling the same story. If that opportunity opened up, I would play. But I'm still kind of battling that battle.
It was a historic night in Springfield.
Senior Bilkis Abdul Kadir blew Rebecca Lobo's scoring record out of the water.
I mean, anything is possible. Never give up, practice, your dreams come true, basically. I literally graduated, went home, gathered all my bags, and went to the airport. So that's how fast things were going.
Where's Bilkis? Right here. Stand up, Bilkis, just so that I want everybody to know. She's got heels on. She's 5'5". She's an athlete on her way to Memphis. Bilkis is an inspiration not simply to Muslim girls. She's an inspiration to all of us.
Bilkis Abdul Kadir has been invited to the Pro-Am Combines. These events give the top college seniors in the country a chance to be evaluated by foreign coaches.
I wasn't ready for what was about to happen, you know, like I was just trying to play.
For the first time in her playing career, Bilkis Abdul Kadir has hit a roadblock. Basketball's governing body, FIBA, has ruled that bans players from wearing equipment that may cause injury to others, including headwear, hair accessories, and jewelry.
In the wake of terrorist attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, for these historic figures, just as for the other 5 million plus Muslims in the United States, this has been an especially visible month. Their faith and world events have echoed across American society, making this question a complex one to answer. What is it like to be a Muslim athlete in the United States today?
It's hard being a young Muslim woman in America. It takes strength to walk outside and look different than everybody else.
I pray that it gets better. But I think, you know, there's so many mindsets that would have to be changed.
People kind of look at you different when they see Muslim women. They have this stereotype that they're quiet, that they're submissive, that they're not supposed to do these certain things. Everybody thinks, yeah, it's just a sport. But when I play basketball, I worry about nothing. It takes me out of real life. I was gonna finish school, I was gonna play basketball, I was gonna do all this stuff, and now it's just like a huge question mark. Right now, I don't know who I am. Am I anybody without basketball, you know? Am I still myself?
All right. So I think our speakers will also speak to some of the other challenges they've experienced. But these are some of the two prominent figures. And I will just make some points before we start. I think, you know, a lot of times there's people from across different generations here on the call. We think treating everybody the same is the fair thing to do. But I think the depth of the discussion today is going to tell you we actually treating everybody the same will allow those who had a head start to stay in those privileged positions. So if we want equality of outcome, in this case, it's a simple example of everybody being able to watch a baseball game because of a barrier being there. We have to be equitable and we have to treat people based on their needs, which is going to be rooted in their culture, ethnicity, gender, along with other axes of difference. And the goal is to eventually kind of crush the barrier, which is the systemic barriers of racism, sexism, Islamophobia, and other forms of policies and practices rooted in institutions that we need to break down as a collective. And part of that is kind of having these brave discussions. So lastly, as we're gonna get into the questions, these are our definitions to kind of set the foundation. What do we mean by these key words? Diversity, really representation that resembles the identity of people in the larger community. So think about it, when you're involved in basketball, from players to coaches to administrators, do those people resemble who you are? And equity is practices, processes, and policies that promote that fair access to opportunities, and that leads to outcomes, right? Someone can be a really great basketball player, but if they can't afford to play basketball, then they're not going to get that opportunity. And inclusion is a big one, especially given my work. Is the environment sustained, welcoming, and safe and protected? Are you valued for who you are and for your contributions, or do you have to change how you look, how you dress, and how you talk to fit in based on what is valued? And I think that's an important piece that's going to come out. So diversity is the tip of the iceberg, but if it's not inclusive, whether it's your workplace or sports, you're not going to want to stick around because it doesn't feel good being there. And then microaggression is the indirect, subtle put downs and insults that minoritized identities, including Muslims, typically will experience via statements, comments, and actions and reactions. And even right now, many Asians are experiencing that based on the stereotypes. All right, so last slide is, as we talk about these things, for me, they all get intersected through a lens of power. What is normal, what is not, who is privileged, who is not. It all comes back to kind of power. And this has a historical piece that goes back to colonialism. It goes back to imperialism, and it goes back to what institutions are valued and who has been in power. And so the Muslim experience is not homogeneous. You're going to hear from 5 different lenses. So I would highly encourage you, anytime you're about to think that way along any axes of difference, whether we're talking about Muslims or we're talking about sexuality, gender, there's no one experience. There's multiple versions to this experience, and that's important, and that's why it's very complex. All right, I'll stop sharing there. Thank you for listening and watching, and I'm going to kind of pose the first question. As I said, our speakers have a range of experience from playing, coaching, refereeing, and community organization and activism. And we're not going to go one by one. Kind of the question is going to be put out there. Different panelists will speak on it. We encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We have Sally and Bryce who's assisting and going to keep monitoring it. And at the end, we'll try to leave 20 minutes to kind of have Q&A from the panelists. All right. So the first question is really reflecting the trajectory of your life and lived experiences within basketball across different sectors. What memories stand out to you with being a Muslim in basketball? How diverse was basketball then compared to now? And what are the good, the bad, and the ugly truth within your journey as you grew up and explored different opportunities? So I'll put it for anyone to jump in. Just got to unmute yourself.
I'll start.
Okay.
Oh,
Even
wow.
better.
No, it's okay. You can start because I'm not a basketball player, so you can start.
Okay, so I'll start. So I was born and raised in Toronto, and my parents came from India. And so for me, we grew up not playing basketball. We grew up playing road hockey, like most Canadians. And we got into basketball somewhere in grade 7 or 8. And high school is where we kind of took basketball on, and it became like our primary sport. So in high school, it was great. I mean, I went to a school called Mark Arnold Collegiate, very diverse, high immigrant population. So most of the basketball team would identify themselves as Black or brown. And it was good, and very positive and overall pretty good experience. I wasn't good enough to play college or university basketball, so I went to school and I became a teacher, and then I started coaching. And I think that's where I first, experienced some of the pros and cons of what basketball brought out. I remember as a first-year teacher and a first-year coach, cultivating a culture of, teamwork and trying to teach my students to be working together, respectful, lifelong lessons as well. But then there were also parents involved with their, kids' playing time, etc. And then racism came out as a first-year teacher. So all of a sudden, as a 22, 23-year-old teacher that's coaching and loving basketball, you're dealing with these real-life issues. And then from there, it took me to officiating, and then there were even more pros and cons, which I can talk about later. But so it kind of started off that way in my journey. But I've been an official now for 15 years, and I've gone from I've been grateful to have been able to officiate across the country in British Columbia, Alberta, all the way to Nova Scotia and PEI, and met people across the country. Some of them I see in the chat as well. And again, I'll talk about some of those experiences later on.
Great, thank you. Amreen?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll just start by saying I'm not really a basketball player. I played rugby in my prime, but I really just started I guess in regards to basketball, I'm more of a facilitator, community activist. I started Hijabi Ballers, which is a nonprofit organization for Muslim females in sport. And really that was kind of my avenue into basketball, because basketball was kind of the most popular, accessible sport in the Muslim communities, Muslim female community at that time when we started. And it still is in a way. And that's what led me to kind of learn about basketball. But I will say this, like growing up, I really just wanted to be part of a sports team or wanted to play sports, but um I moved to Canada when I was 10. So I think even at that age, I really wanted to play basketball, but I always saw basketball as something that was inaccessible to me at that time. And that may have been because of my identity as a Muslim female athlete or Muslim female, someone who wanted to play sports. And I don't know, I just always felt that there were people who were better than me that would take the opportunities that were on the table. And part of the reason that I started Hijabi Ballers was to kind of provide those opportunities for people who were not as good as basketball or not as good as whatever sport, but wanted the opportunity to play and get better. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my overall my experience with basketball. But we've come a long way with Hijabi Ballers, and with basketball we've partnered with the Toronto Raptors. We were kind of the inspiration behind the Raptors releasing launching their hijab, which was a huge step for Muslim female basketball fans and just the basketball world in general. It was kind of never been done before in the NBA, so it put Muslim females on the map, and kind of solidified like our interest in basketball in a way. It like validated that Muslim females weren't just here to sit on the sidelines. Like, we're here to play, we're here to like be fans. Yeah, I'll let someone else talk.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I guess I'll just add as well, just keep going on with the Muslim women. I know I'll just start with the diversity of it. It wasn't diverse then. It's slowly becoming diverse now, but throughout even my playing experience through middle school, high school, college, I think I have a newborn, so if you guys hear anything in the background, don't worry. It wasn't very diverse. So kind of like what Amreen was saying, it's hard to look up to other females and seeing people in those roles where there aren't women in those roles, especially coming from a Muslim family, which made it even more difficult to go out, tournaments, sleepovers, being able to travel. Like, that's not allowed religiously, and even more so culturally, right? So breaking down those barriers was tough. I know one of a big memory that stands out for me is just in high school when you'd have those double headers, and we'd have the second game, it'd be during Ramadan. And I'd be pulled off during, when you break fast on the side. I got a little lunch, and, you can tell people are asking teammates are asking, like, what are you doing? Not even water, the basic stuff that you hear all the time. And at that time, as someone that didn't really have anyone around them that went through it, it was, I wasn't as confident responding and being in that type of position, right? So I'm hoping, with Hijabi Ballers and other organizations, like, they can break through those barriers and give Muslim women that confidence going in to hopefully go further in the game.
And sorry, can you hear me there, guys?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, to touch on what Aisha kind of talked about here with regards to being confident in yourself and your religion. For me, I started playing basketball in high school, kind of similar to Farhan. Started with the road hockey, and then as I got into high school, I made the basketball team. And essentially, it was around the time when 9/11 happened. So it was Islamophobia was actually a big thing back then. And at that time, I was kind of ashamed, to be honest, to represent my faith on my sleeve, because a lot of people, as you know, the backlash that happened after 9/11, and having to, like Aisha mentioned, answering certain questions about your faith and not necessarily know the answers. So there was a space that was made available. It was called ISLAM. ISLAM is basically a Muslim basketball league. It started like in 2003 or 2004. And Farhan was also a part of that league and part of organizing it as well. And that was the first platform that I got where I got to play basketball and I wasn't ashamed of my faith. And I seen other people who practice the same faith who had the similar interests, basketball. So that was kind of the springboard that kind of got me into the basketball space and identifying as a Muslim at the same time. And from there, we had a men's basketball team. It was called Tawheed, and Tawheed is essentially the premise that there's the one God and the oneness of God, the same God that's in Judaism and Christianity. And we kind of Islam allowed us to be confident in our faith, and we were able to get a men's basketball team that played all over Ontario and the States as well. And our team name was Tawheed. So we wore our religion on our sleeve after that. And it was that was something that definitely helped us. So in Islam, I don't know if you want to I can put the web address here, islam.ca, something you can check out. It's a men's league. It's a Muslim men's league. Non-Muslims and Muslims alike come and play. We have prayers and things like that, and kind of a safe space for Muslims and non-Muslims alike to kind of break those barriers and kind of understand each other, right? Like a person like me who has a beard, or anybody else a bigger beard and has kind of fits the description of the stereotypical extremist, quote unquote. But when you when you play in these leagues and you play with non-Muslims and you get a double, and then you pray they see you praying and leading the prayer, and then you see you joking around with you. You're like, hey, these Muslims aren't that bad. They're kind of just like us, right? So that was a great way for me to kind of wear my religion on my sleeve.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, I'll chime in here as well. To definitely echo some of what the other speakers said. For me, my family immigrated from India, so I was 8 when I came to Canada. Grew up in the west side of Scarborough. And for me growing up, basketball wasn't very diverse. Everyone that played basketball where I lived, as far as I was concerned, was just like me. So I didn't see much diversity in basketball growing up, but I didn't feel underrepresented at all. My earliest basketball memories as a child are from the 90s, playing on the outdoor courts of the church parking lot across from where we lived all summer. All sorts of races and religious people represented in those on those basketball courts. We play, all day in the summer until we couldn't see the net anymore. So really, basketball was what brought us together. I don't know, maybe it's just the naivety of being so young, but I look back at those times very fondly. And similar to what Farhan said, I've officiated all throughout Ontario and different parts of Canada as well. And I never, as I got more into officiating and doing things outside of where I grew up, I definitely saw a lot of diversity in basketball as well. I think you also mentioned, Ardavan, about memorable experiences too. And I think of late, one of the most memorable experiences I had with being Muslim in basketball was actually last year around this time, when a number of officials that are on this call of various faiths fasted together during Ramadan. And that was an amazing experience, definitely a show of solidarity, support, and togetherness, and definitely a very, very memorable experience for sure.
Great, thank you all for sharing. Ramadan starts next week. At the end, we're going to put out a Ramadan challenge with some options if you want to kind of get a feel for the experience and in solidarity to learn more about process and what it takes. But I think, as you all spoke, sports was a unifying factor because you are all involved with it to different degrees. So it clearly opened up many doors. And I think, as Usman's point, it really helped build self-confidence. And unfortunately, coming from a teaching background, many people leave institutions, whether it's a career or simply playing sports, because it's not fun anymore. And, in this day and age, the winning at all costs attitude, which is permeating all aspects of sports and kind of being caught on video, is amplifying some of those negative experiences with parents and across kind of different people who are involved. So the next question is kind of going to get a little bit more personal. I know some of you have spoken about it, but I think it's important for us to kind of speak to these truths, because we can only help break those barriers if we're able to articulate it and share it. Because a lot of times we are also afraid to share these experiences, because we have to be willing to be vulnerable, and it is a form of risk taking that can backfire or can take away an opportunity from us, right? So the question is, can you think of examples where you found it challenging to be proud of your Muslim identity, or you felt you had to compromise between your faith and what was expectations packaged in the form of professionalism, or here's how we do it here in this setting? And did you feel you need to suppress your Muslim identity in these settings and situations? And how did you navigate it at that time?
Aaron, this is
I
Shah.
guess
I
I
can
have,
speak on it.
So I had two that I could probably speak to. One, it's close to what this question kind of asking, but I know scheduling conflicts where I felt a clash between, being part of a team and my religion and my family, right? When you'd have Ramadan and Eid, and then, you'd have a tournament or something's going on that's important. So a lot of the time I had to choose, right? And most of the time I chose basketball because of the guilt I felt, whether, it's like not meant you through a microaggression with like my coaching or my players of, you're not going to be there. Why wouldn't you come? You made a commitment, et cetera, et cetera. So it was choosing between, going to prayers in the morning for Eid or making sure I'm at that 8 a.m. game. So I know that was one. And I'll let somebody else speak and I'll come back to it if anything.
Great, thank you.
I'll talk a little bit. This wasn't really with basketball, because as we made it clear, I didn't grow up playing basketball. But I in rugby culture, drinking was like a really big part of rugby. Going to bars after games, keggers, whatever. And it kind of just like came with the package. It's like, okay, you're part of a rugby team. Like, here's your initiation. After each game, we would just go to a bar. It was just part of it, and it was just something that was never. It was just never on the table for discussion. Like, okay, where should we go to eat after a game or something like that? And I always felt like that was kind of the one thing that I didn't like about rugby. And honestly, like, everything else was great, and I loved playing rugby, and I really didn't have a lot of Islamophobic or negative discriminatory racist experiences while playing rugby, but that was a really big one. Yeah, and I think as part of the culture in a lot of other sports, alcohol is a big part of it too. And as I don't know if the audience is aware, but as Muslims, we can't drink alcohol, and a lot of or like be, I don't know. I mean, culturally, like, you don't want to be near alcohol. You don't want to be near people who are drinking all the time, things like that. So that was just something that I struggled with when playing rugby. And it was just something that I never had the courage, I guess, to bring up. I was like 18, 19 playing rugby. Everyone on my team drank, even there were like not Muslims on my team who drank. So it was just, I just never felt like I was in the space to bring it up with my coach. And that's not to say that, my coaches weren't great. Like, they were just, I don't know. I mean, I guess societal pressures kind of push you to accepting things the way they are. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about an experience that I actually had when I was on the Toronto Association of Basketball Officials. I started in 2013, I believe, and then I ref for about 4 years, and then due to personal commitments, I could no longer ref. But when I first started, I had overtly Muslim. I have a pretty big beard. I had a bigger beard back then, actually. But when I started out, I was fairly nervous because it was not commonplace for people to have excessive facial hair. There is a certain clean-cut persona that is, I guess, unspoken and kind of required in the officiating world. And when I went and I started reffing, that's something I'd be actually very self-conscious about. And a lot of the refs I would were partnered up with, my mates, they would actually ask me just directly, like, so you're Muslim? You know, it's like one of those questions, like the elephant in the room. But in my mind, like, why is there an elephant in the room in the first place? You know, and even some people, and Farhan was somebody who mentored me and helped me becoming a better ref and being in that space. And Farhan, you know, they would kind of directly relate me to Farhan, like, so you know Farhan, eh? So Farhan got you in here. So I felt like it was like this kind of elephant in the room, like why is that even a topic of discussion, you know? But you know what? Honestly, those things are welcome. That's the way I look at it. Most people will ask these questions because they're curious. So I generally would try to answer them the best I can, and try to make people understand that yes, I'm a Muslim and this is something that I do to practice my faith. And at the end of the day, when I showed the aptitude and the skills and the willingness to excel at my position as a referee, all those conversations kind of dissolve, right? When they can see that you're capable of performing your duties at a high level, those things don't even kind of matter anymore because they can see that you're a competent person. That's what I found anyway. Maybe someone could find it different. I mean, Saif and Farhan have been on the board much longer than me, and their experience are probably more deeper anyway. But that's something that I kind of dealt with.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
Saif, do you want to go first, or should I?
Sorry, I can say a few things. I think we probably have a lot of similar experiences, at least with facial hair. I think just talking about facial hair, I do want to put a caveat out there. I've never had a beard this big before, so some of my experiences that I might share might be a little skewed if you think this is my normal look. My beard usually is this big, but I'm just making the most of COVID right now. From as far back as I can remember, there were always comments about facial hair and the perceived lack of professionalism that it conveys as an official. And I think most of the feedback, comments, concerns, suggestions that were given to me by, I'm assuming, well-meaning people were with that in mind. Just, you know, I think it was really out of genuine, you know, just wanting me to be as good as I can be in terms of the look that I had as an official. I will say though that the idea of you know, facial hair and the lack of professionalism conveys, that mentality was contrary to how things were in my professional career and in everything I did outside of basketball. I remember my peers asking me why I didn't shave before a tournament. If I'd be concerned I'd be cut as a result of it. I've been to camps where evaluators have asked me why I bothered to show up with facial hair and I was wasting their time. Told I'd never officiate at higher levels unless I shave my beard. You know, I never had a colleague ask me why I didn't shave before an interview. You know, I never had, you know, as far as I'm concerned, never had a hiring manager turn me down for a position because of my beard. But in officiating, that was always a very big deal. And you know, I found it very odd how much of an issue it was for others, because until I got into officiating and really started to, you know, move up as an official, I didn't realize how much of an issue that was for people. And I also, you know, I found it interesting how there was always exceptions for November, but exceptions can be made for me. So, you know, I always had that in the back of my mind too. I will say though that most of the time, from my experience, this concern was sort of limited to the leaders in officiating. You know, I didn't have this vibe from players, coaches, parents, spectators, you know, as far as having facial hair. I've had parents come and thank me for officiating their kids' games and to see someone like them on the court. Students have approached me asking how I got involved in officiating, just as a result of identifying as Muslim. And as I get more experience and became more comfortable with what I was doing, the comments about facial hair, I think, to me, were just another aspect of officiating that required you to have thick skin, right? And that's sort of the way I kind of overcame it, because by that point, we're used to so much abuse as officials that, you know, it was really easy to kind of brush off some of those things. I will say, though, that I find it interesting when others ask me if I had received special permission from my supervisor to have facial hair. I remember one person asking me about they told me they didn't have a beard for religious reasons, but they used to have one for cultural reasons. And they were encouraged to shave it off during the basketball season because of the perceptions. I've had new recruits that wore turbans join our local association, and they told me they didn't think they could do it until they saw me officiate. So I found it quite sad, really, that there's so many officials or prospective officials that are having to choose between their cultural and religious identities and participating in a sport they love. So I think to some degree, we're putting up barriers, sometimes subconsciously, and I think it is definitely a disservice to the sport. And I do think, though, like, I really do feel that most of the time when these comments were, given to me, it was out of genuine, they were genuine, and it was out of, people thinking that this advice would help me be better in, what I'm trying to do. And I really think it was, that was sort of the intent behind it. So I never really looked at it as a, as a negative. I really think that there were more times that I was cut from tournaments because I just wasn't good enough than because I had facial hair. But sometimes when you hear that over and over again after so many years, you really start to doubt, what's actually going on. So there's that part of it as well.
Okay, I can't top that. That was really good. But as I'm listening to Saif and Osman and just different experience, even Aisha's experience in basketball. Obviously, I've been part of basketball at all levels for the last 15 years. For those of you who don't know, I worked a shot clock at the Raptors games. So from the highest levels all the way down to the high school level, and then including community organizations like ISLAM and another organization that we run called the Salam Cup. And we had officials from all over Canada and evaluators come for that tournament as well. It brings Muslim basketball players together. So I've seen it all in the last 15 years. And I want to start off with some of the positives that I've experienced. And I jotted it down. So if you see me looking on the side, I put it on my laptop. So one of the great things about officiating is, especially at the higher levels, we're on the road a lot. And anybody who's coaching or playing at a high level knows this. Always on the road every weekend, etc. So I've been in a car with officials for 4, 5, 6 hour drives. I've been on a plane with officials, traveling across the country. And so what happens is you talk a little bit of basketball, but you talk a lot about life. And what I realized was most of us, including myself, we're very ignorant, meaning we don't know about each other's religions and cultures and families and things like that. And we take the time to get to know each other, and you realize that we have a lot more similarities than differences. So one thing I really appreciated was throughout these trips, officials would get to know me and I'd get to know them. And they had genuine just questions like, hey, like, why do you pray? Or why don't you eat pork? Or why don't you drink alcohol? Or what do you eat? Or what do you do? What's your schedule like, et cetera, right? And then, and we'd live together at hotels or whatever as we're going to our games, these tournaments. And I'd be getting up at 5:30 in the morning to pray. And I'd be like trying to be super quiet, making sure the lights are off, and going to the bathroom to, do my ablution and, wash my face and my arms and things like that. And then they would genuinely get to know me and get to know what's going on. And I think that dialogue helped. And they'd ask about facial hair. This was, like Saif said, one of the big things in officiating. And it's funny because, you look at the highest levels, like in the NBA, and, if you could imagine Steve Nash, who's coaching the Brooklyn Nets, telling James Harden, sorry, we can't start you and you can't play because you have a beard. That would be, like the fans would revolt and everybody would go crazy because James Harden is an amazing player. But even if it wasn't, just that it never happens in any other sphere or workplace. Like Saif's, pretty qualified. He's managing people in his company. And and in the school system, I think we're lucky because we advocate for inclusion, and we're against, like, that's where it starts always in schools, right? And so anyways, I think about these things, and so some of the really good things that came out of this is as people got to know me and we're traveling, they would reach out to me and say, hey, I'll just give an example. Like Dave Maxon was on the call. He'd be like, hey, we're traveling to Carleton University this weekend. What time do you want to leave? When are your prayer times? Taking that extra step to be inclusive, it means a lot to us. It's greater than basketball. It's about life, right? And over the course of even last year, as Saif was saying, we had people like Dan Esty and Dave Maxon who were like fasting with us, and we also try to, you know, incorporate some of their lifestyle and their values into our lives, and we realized there's a lot of similarities. So some of those positives were there. You know, when we go out to eat, it's like, hey, is there food that you can eat there, etc. Right? Then the flip side, the last 15 years of officiating or so, it feels like you have to work 5 times as hard to get to the same position as someone else who may not, you know, as an example, have facial hair. So I remember when I was trying to get onto the university basketball scene. So for those of you who don't officiate, you have to go to these camps. And at these camps, it wasn't even an implied thing. It was very explicit. It was saying, if you want to referee university basketball, you cannot have facial hair. And I remember having conversations initiated by the people who were in that position of authority. And their exact quote was, if you want to officiate university basketball, then you need to shave that SHIT off your face. Those were the exact words, right? And I mean, that's just the beginning. I've been called terrorist to my face in the basketball scene. You look like a terrorist. Other officials have been called terrorists. I've had coaches at the university scene do that as well, in terms of like, oh, why do you have facial hair? Why do you? So there's a lot of, and it's not about individual officials. I want to make that clear, or individual people. It's the system. It's a systemic thing from the NBA all the way down. I've had one-on-one conversations with NBA officials that have directly said, you cannot have facial hair at the NBA and the NCAA and the FIBA level. You cannot. And if you do, they will find other reasons to like kind of take you out. And that doesn't happen with players or coaches, I think, but we have to, this is the beginning, dialoguing, and then trying to have policies in place to move forward.
Wonderful. I mean, thank you for all the panelists for sharing these personal and in many ways traumatizing experiences. You know, before we go to the next question, I just want to add a point that it is exhausting at times, and I'm sure all of us have experienced it. But you know, myself growing up, we were always told fit in or you're not going to get the opportunity. And I think, as Aisha said, as I gained this language, I went to school and did a master's in social justice. I learned to articulate. I learned to, what is it that I want to embrace? How do you go from being ashamed to proud? I think that's a process. If you're a coach or if you're a committee member on this call, we want you to be thinking about that. You know, how does that Muslim kid, how does that Muslim employee feel within that space? It's not just diverse, is it actually inclusive? Do the power dynamics make them feel like they belong, or is the pressure on them to fit in? And as a joke aside, you know, me and Farhan were both in Toronto. How many times people come up to me and like, hey, Farhan, you did a great game last night. And I'm like, I didn't referee last night. And this happens even after we correct them, like 30 seconds later. So, I mean, it's a joke between us, but I mean, those things add up sometimes. Other forms of microaggressions are getting our names mispronounced all the time. So please get to learn the names of your players, their first names and last names. What communities do they come from and what are their needs? This is what we need as part of this discussion to change the culture of sport. And I think, go back to the earlier points, that, you know, we need to create that safe space. And I just want to shout out some leagues, predominantly in Toronto, but hopefully we could expand. You know, Somali Men's Basketball League, you know, ISLAM, Dean Up. These were all created because Muslim kids and identities didn't have a space to go to be proud of who they are. And in those safe spaces, they learn to embrace who they are. And it's important. So the next couple of questions, I'm going to bundle two, just being conscious of time, and you can kind of tackle any you want. But the goal is to kind of, we've shared some of these negative experiences, but the so what in all this is, how do we make sports better? Like, if your star player told you, I'm perfect, you're not going to take that, right? You're going to say there's always room for improvement. So this is not to say some of these organizations are not doing great things, are not opening up opportunities, but there is room for improvement. All right. And we have to be honest about that. So the questions are, based on your level of involvement in the community, what can organizations, whether it's basketball or non-basketball organizations, do to become more equitable and create more access to opportunities? What has worked based on your experiences in supporting Muslim identities, and what has not? Because sometimes we try something and it's just not it, right? But it's okay. And the other question is, organizations really need to go from just being welcoming to being anti-oppressive in 2021. Thinking about George Floyd's death, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Asian racism. You cannot just say we're welcoming now. You have to actually proactively be anti-oppressive. And that's important. And if you're in a leadership position on an organization, I ask you, does your organization have a policy, have reporting procedures? All these are going to help create these dialogues and to have discussions about these things. So how important, this is the second question, kind of combining it with the first question, how important are the roles of allies and solidarity in working with other causes and communities and sectors to actually challenge these systemic issues?
I'll hop on. I kind of wanted to touch on what Farhan was saying in the last bit too. A lot of this is all of this really is systemic, and on the surface, to people who haven't experienced it, it seems like, well, it's a safety issue. You can't wear a hijab and play basketball because it's a safety issue. You can't, have a beard and blah blah blah. Like there's always something where the people at the top will find a way to get their way. And if you haven't watched Bilqis's documentary Life with a Basketball, that explains it very well. Like this is the top level FIBA, and FIBA says, your hijab is a safety issue. Sorry, you can't play, but it's not. Like it's deeper than that, and if the people at the top really want to change some of the rules and some of the policies, then it will get done. And if they don't, then it won't. And it's all of our jobs as people in this field to make the people above us uncomfortable and to make them get out of their comfort zone and to kind of push them to look deeper. And it's easy for people who haven't been oppressed or marginalized to say, well, no, it's not a systemic issue, but really, like, it is. Okay, but that's like a fact. But I think when it comes down to like what can organizations do on the ground level, like having more Muslim coaches, more Muslim referees, and people who are visibly Muslim, and people who like the public can relate to is a first step, is an obvious step, but it's not nearly enough. You cannot put the onus as the president, the whatever director, and the board chair, whatever position of power you're in, you cannot put the onus of making a space inclusive, equitable, diverse on that one Muslim coach you have, or on that one Muslim board member you have, or whatever it is. Like, it's your job to educate yourself, to educate the people around you, and it's your job to create this pathway of transparency, of a space where your employees, your coaches, your administrators feel comfortable to come to you with their issues and their problems. And the simple solution, it's not simple, but I guess the main takeaway I think is to always have an open mind to ask Muslim female athletes, Muslim athletes, Muslim officials, like people you're working with, what can you do to help? And I think that's where the conversation will start. It's about creating that open space where people can come to you with their ideas, their approaches on how you can make the space more inclusive and diverse and equitable for them.
And just to add on as well, from the other way, I think as Muslims, we have to look at ourselves in our own communities, because I feel my biggest challenge growing up wasn't outside of my own household, right? I had to tell my parents that I was going to the library after school and I really had basketball practice, because it wasn't seen as like you should be focusing on your studies versus going and playing all these sports all the time. So I think it starts there. And I think a lot of women are discouraged from playing sports because of that as well. Even when I was coaching U16 basketball or U19, like I would have girls that would come out that wouldn't be able to come all the time because their parents wouldn't let them. So even coaches, or if you're part of a team and this is happening from someone, they might not come to you to talk to you about it. They'll shy away and just won't show up anymore. So to kind of like dive deeper in that. I think it's more for women, Muslim women, because I feel like there is more of a community for men. In growing up, I didn't really have friends that played basketball that were Muslim, right? So I think building a strong community, for our own children and, other people to reach out and really help them out in that aspect. Because I know for my own kids, I'm going to open those doors, right? Where my parents didn't put me into sports. I was very lucky along the way that things lined up. My high school coach helped me out with payments because my parents weren't going to invest into something that they didn't see as important, right? They pay for the tutor, but they're not going to pay for the rep basketball, right? So, investing in them, opening doors, watching for those kids that start shying away, not showing up, and not knowing that's not because they don't want to be there, but because their parents aren't comfortable, maybe having a conversation with those parents to let them be comfortable for those kids to be a part of that community.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in before we go to the last set of questions, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
I think, Ardavan, to their point, to Aisha's and Amreen's point as well, I think that's important. But what we spearheaded was the Muslim Basketball Association. Essentially, we have a men's league for Muslim men, and we have a skills camp and development, and a smaller league for kids between the age of 6 and 17. And we try and incorporate fundamentals of the faith as well in the league and in the player development. I think it's important at the grassroots level to have Muslims in general understand their faith, because there are a lot of misconceptions out there, a lot of things that have been peddled by the media or other than that since certain events. But nevertheless, I think it's important for young Muslims to understand their faith and kind of be able to dispel the misconceptions when they do enter the space. So whether it be officiating, whether it be when you play in leagues in high schools or coaching, or whatever it may be. So this is something that we tried to incorporate into our programs. So I think that it's important at a lower level to start with that.
A great point. Thank you. Say for Farhan, you want to jump on this, or you want me to go to the next question?
I'll just quickly talk about allies. I think that's super important. We're doing this in school right now as teachers. There's anti-Black racism education board-wide. I'm sure it's province-wide and even country-wide right now. And there's a term that I learned today. It was actually in class with my students. It's called being an upstander. I never heard of that term before. Maybe you have, Dr. Eizadirad, but an upstander is a person who recognizes injustice, knows their personal strengths, and uses those strengths to create change. Never heard of the term. I was like, that is an awesome term. So you can, all of us, we should all be upstanders, but especially we should be anti-Black racism. It's not enough just to be pro-Black. Anti-Black racism, anti-Asian violence, anti-Islamophobia, anti all of this stuff. And that's become upstanders. And I have multiple examples in this journey of people that have stood up for me and, my beliefs throughout my, basketball journey. And I really appreciate it. I'm still getting messages right now, actually, of those same people. And I think it's very, very important to create personal grassroots change as well as systemic change.
Great, thank you. Saif?
I don't have a whole lot to add there. I will say though, a lot of times, it doesn't take a lot. People have already brought this up in our discussion earlier. Even something as simple as just checking for when different religious observances are happening, so that meeting and events that are being scheduled are mindful of those things. Like even things like that would be helpful to making things more inclusive, for sure.
Thank you. And I think you all spoke of the power of community, and I'm a big advocate of that. Like in community, we hope and we heal. And a lot of us, we have to heal from some of these past traumatic experiences and find who we are. Kind of connects with the points you raised, Farhan and Amreen. And then we're able to then from there mobilize and strategize to take on some of these inequities. But some of us are not even in that mind state to challenge it because we've been constantly oppressed and we just don't even want to bother with it, right? And I think sacrifice is another big one. like we've all, I think through your stories, have talked about how you had to sacrifice, whether it was your values in some situations and different things. But I want to kind of challenge, the non-Muslim people who are in the dominant social groups in society in terms of experiencing privilege. What are you willing to sacrifice? That's important when we talk about allyship and solidarity, and it has to be beyond the statement and posting something on social media. How are you willing to challenge what is the norm, which in a way is actually privileging you? So by not challenging it, you actually reap the benefits and are complicit. And it's easier said than done, but that's really, if you want to challenge some of these systemic barriers, we all have to do our part. And I think that's important, and that goes back to the difference between equality and equity. So I think going to the last question, and I'm going to say if you could keep your responses to about 1 or 2 minutes, that way we have ample time for some Q&A when we open it up to the audience. If you can give advice to your old self with respect to figuring out your identity growing up and seeking opportunities, what would you do? And the second part to that question is, where do we go from here and from these conversations today? A tough one, I know, so take some time to digest it. Advice to yourself, and where do we go from here? Because this is the tip of the iceberg. Doesn't mean you came to this 90 session and the world is going to be perfect tomorrow, right? So how do we channel this energy? How do we channel this and say, go back to our communities from all across Canada, different places in the world, people are on the call, to actually do our part to challenge some of these inequities at a systemic level?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in again. I think what advice I would give would be to fight a little harder, be a little braver, and don't feel the need to sacrifice your values, your identity, even though there is a pressure to do so. I mean, it's easier said than done, and I cannot imagine giving this advice to a 10-year-old and telling them, go be brave and keep your hijab on and take the crap that people give you. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's more about what others can do than what you can do, especially like as a kid. But that's I guess what I would say.
Thank you.
Dr.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You could go. You could
go. My advice to my younger self would be to reach out to people within the community as well as just outside of the community's allies, and reach out for help and communicate, and not try to do things on your own, or to do things maybe in secret or hiding. Be open about it, and it's okay to have or to get help, and it's okay to allow people to hold doors for you, and that's how we all get in different positions or different spheres of our life, right? So I think reaching out and helping and reaching out to allies, and hopefully those allies reach back, and then we create a culture that is inclusive and is dealing with these types of microaggressions. Until we do that on a systemic level, and it's just individual anecdotal situations that are occurring. But clearly we can see that this is happening on a widespread, not even just a provincial or a national level, but on a worldwide level, even outside of basketball. But basketball is just a microcosm of this stuff, right? So that would be my advice to myself.
Thank you.
I think I can echo a lot of what Farhan's saying. I made a couple of notes about this one, and it was essentially the same thing: to be more willing to talk to people, seek help, find more, have more of that support system earlier on. Talk Dr. Eizadirad into maybe doing something like this sooner. I'm not sure what took you so long, but there's a lot. I think looking back, there's a lot of ways you can do things differently. At the same time, it's sometimes hard to tell at a personal level. because you end up being, a product of your lived experiences. And, sure, there are things that definitely I would suggest I could have done differently, but at the same time, part of it helps with the growth and development as an individual as well. So, but I will say though, I'm in a role now where, I've been officiating for about 15 years. There are different things that I'm doing in my professional career. I have a leadership position in my local area as well. So part of it is, what am I doing to help address the needs of those that are sort of coming after me, right? Have I done anything in the role that I'm in to help make things a bit easier for others? And in a way, yes, but overall, like I think there's always more that can be done, and I feel that it's interesting when you're in position of some sort of authority where you have some influence. If you don't make the most of those opportunities to help make improvements, it's hard to expect others that don't necessarily identify, with your views and beliefs and things like that, to sort of lift a heavy load. So I think part of that also has to be some personal accountability, not to my younger self, but I'm talking more so, to my present self.
Thank you.
Dr. Ardavan, is it possible if I could say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Hassan. Peace be upon all of you. I'm actually very happy to be here with you guys. I just want to say a story of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he has shown us what to do in this very situation. And it's so easy, subhanallah. And so this story is actually short. I'll just keep it so short. So this old lady, she was going to a trip and she needed help. So our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he helped her, and he was so nice to her. So she said, "Oh, don't talk to me about Muhammad," because back then Islam was like, it was still new, and all of them back then, they were saying, "Oh, don't talk to Muhammad. He's a magician. He makes up, like he makes up some scenarios that is not true and nobody believes it." So he did not say anything. So she told him, "Don't talk to me about him. I don't want to speak to him." And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept his mouth shut. He did not say nothing. He's like, okay. So on the journey, he helped her and he was so nice to her and stuff like that. And at the end of the trip, she said, "I didn't get your name, young man." And he told her Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then she was so surprised. And she mistakes, she's like, "I should have never said nothing about Muhammad." And she said, "Talk to me about Muhammad. Tell me about Muhammad." And subhanallah, she converted to Islam, alhamdulillah. And it was a very nice story.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it speaks to kind of not judging a book by its cover at a micro level. So thank you. Aisha and Uzman, I think, do you want to take on the last question before we open it up to other members of the audience?
I think it's important just
go ahead,
sorry. In our communities to have diversity. Like I'm very fortunate coaching at Humber on the women's team, that we have a very diverse coaching staff, and our head coach, I think he's in this, AJ, put together a coaching staff of different ethnicities, cultures, religions, and within that we, even just in our team chat, wishing people Merry Christmas, wishing people Happy Ramadan, Happy Eid, Happy Hanukkah, whatever the religious thing. So it's being, embracing everybody. And I think that's the important part. Everybody becomes comfortable. Everybody is learning from each other. We even talk to each other about, what's going on in our households. And I think it's kind of like what Farhan was saying, like when you have that time together and you're able to build those relationships with people, you're able to see a different side, right? All those things that you might hear about in the news or whatever else is going on in the world, they kind of go out the window because you get to know the people for who they are. So I think basketball in general is a beautiful place for it, because you get to know people. Sports kind of tears down all the other stuff, right? And I'm very fortunate to have been put into sports because of that. And I know a lot of us are.
And to Aisha's point, sports does break down those barriers and it kind of dissolves all those elephants in the room. And one thing that I would say is that would stick to the mantra or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, the best of you, or the best, those with best character. So like Farhan, Saif, and even Amreen mentioned, having those conversations with your colleagues and your peers and those people you meet in these spaces, coupled with the best upright and moral character, I think that's a good way to represent our faith, and allowing sports to break down those barriers and having those conversations can hopefully influence it at the systemic level as well.
Wonderful. So thank you to all the panelists. I am going to make some remarks. I put a resource in the chat as an extension of these conversations, and then we are going to open it up for Q&A. So I'm just going to share my screen. I do want to also thank some people. So here we go. I want to end with a quick poem. If you know me, you know I like poetry, so I'm going to use The Rose That Grew from Concrete from Tupac. I think it speaks volumes to what we've talked about here today. And the poem goes like this. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong. It learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its streams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared. And the reason why I chose that is there are many people in our community, whether we're talking about basketball in the school system. I know there's many educators on this call, or you're just a coach or a community leader. Ask yourself, who are the roses that are right now planted in the concrete on your team and in your community? Who needs that social support net? And reach out to them. Because if we don't, I mean, people on this panel, they're success stories, even though they've had their challenges. But there are many stories who are not success stories, who are right now locked up in jail or are dead because we didn't provide that social safety support net. So for some people, it's a difference between life and death. It all depends where you are in this trajectory, and that's important. And the final thing is, first I want to start by thanking some people, tell you what's going to be coming next before we go to Q&A. All the organizations who I reached out and were willing to be part of this movement. This is really a movement we're trying to start. It's not a one and done 90-minute session. You know, in May, we're going to do an event around being Black. In June, being female. And we're going to do 2 more. And the whole idea is to build towards a symposium where we get different organizations who want to be part of this movement, get into a room and say, how do we change this culture? So this is just a starting step. We're going to put a quick survey in the chat now of Sally, if you could put that in the chat. It's a really 2 or 3 questions to get some feedback. You can always send me personal feedback at educationconsultant@gmail.com. We're also going to email the resource list that was posted in the chat, but we'll also email it. And we're going to provide a recording of this event and all other events on YouTube in the next few weeks under Education Consulting channel. So please subscribe and we'll send you a reminder. So thank yous as organizations: Ontario Basketball, Basketball Canada, Wheelchair Basketball Canada, Toronto Association of Basketball Officials, Canadian Basketball Officials Commission, and Hijabi Ballers. We hope to continue to collaborate and support these discussions and brave conversations. And I got to give a big shout out. I think I want to stop sharing my screen so you can see them. If you can put your video on, Sally Abu Diab and Bryce Bartman, they were really instrumental around the logistics and the planning of this event. So put your video on, and I want to say a big thank you, because without you two, this event would not be possible. Okay, so before we go to the Q&A, me and Farhan had a talk, and we said we're going to propose a quick, you only got 2 minutes to explain it, Farhan, a quick fasting challenge. So, you know, Ramadan is starting next week. Typically, we would fast from sunset to sundown. There's different variations you can try if you just want to have the experience. Of course, be cognizant of your health conditions, but you can do a half day, a full day, no food, no water, or no food, but still drink water. So, Farhan, how are you going to propose it to them?
Yeah, so Ramadan starts next Tuesday, approximately. Quick background, so Muslims fast for 1 month from dawn to sunset every day. So in Toronto, next week, dawn is approximately around, I don't know, 4:30 a.m. and sunset's going to be around 8:30 a.m. So it ends up being about 16, 17 hours, no food, no water for 30 days straight. After sunset, you can eat or drink water, obviously, and then you have to stop eating by dawn. That's what we're going to do, but you can modify it. and you can join us on this journey, experience what a fast is like. Many faiths have fasting in their faith as well, but they may have different variations of it. Last year, we had about 5 or 6 of us that did it that weren't Muslim, but they loved it. And so you can obviously, modify the hours. You can just say you're going to do a wet fast, which means you're going to drink water but no food throughout the day. Or you can do the full dry fast, which is no food or no water. Try it out. That's the only way you can experience it and see how you feel. Those athletes that we mentioned in the chat at the beginning, a lot of them have played their sports or have been involved in athletics at an elite level during Ramadan and during their fast. So like Hakeem Olajuwon's statistics actually went up when he was fasting in the playoffs, and he won a championship. So hopefully we can become more efficient and better at what we're doing, whether it's sports or whatever, but experience it. I mean, you can talk to people that have tried it and they'll have their own feedback on it, but and you can Google obviously like benefits of fasting if you want to just check it out before you get into it next week. Starts next Tuesday or Wednesday, approximately that time, depending on the lunar month. But Ardavan will maybe send out an email saying it's starting or whatever.
All right, great, thank you. One of the links in the resource list is Hakeem Olajuwon's best performances while fasting. So I think go through that list and you like that one. All right, we'd like to open it up really at this point for anybody from the audience who would like to have a question, comment. We just asked to keep the questions short and to the point, being conscious of time so we could take on a couple of questions. And any of the panelists can really jump in if they want to speak on that question. Or you could also type it into the chat if you don't want to say it orally. So I see we have a question here from Dave Maxon saying, very eye-opening, well done. Are things changing or are things improving? So anybody can really take that on.
And that's a very broad question. I think the simple answer is there's always work to do. So even if things are improving and getting better, we can't look at how far we've come as a measure of how long we have to go, because there's always work to be done.
Great.
Can I just say something? Hi, I wasn't sure how, because I put my hand up, so I'm not sure how you were organizing the Q&As, but I just want to say it's a great presentation thus far, so thank you guys. And secondly, I'm not a Muslim, but I do have family members and close friends who are, based on my diverse background, but and also I'm a teacher. So what I think that would be helpful, it's just a shame as always when all these amazing presentations are on air, usually you're preaching to the crowd, right, or the choir, as some would say, and even though I did spread it far and wide to non-Muslim colleagues, I'm not seeing them on the chat, but I think the information that you provided and the list of things to look out for, while I am familiar with the majority, there were some new ones that I'm like, wow, I need to pay attention to that too. I think it would be great if it's possible to have a list of look fors, especially for students, and especially around this time during Ramadan, because many tend to forget that we have a whole month dedicated to Ramadan, and we do have students who are Muslim, and teachers will always organize things without thinking outside of their personal realm. So, so things like EQAO, you find it's usually during Ramadan, things like EQAO and sports and so forth. So it'd be great to have a resource out there, if it's coming from you or another, a really just a go-to list that will support teachers in the classroom this time of month. Doesn't have to be huge, but the things that you mentioned, I mean, I made a list too to support myself as well as my colleagues, but having it coming from you guys or any organization that can really enforce that for school boards now, especially during COVID as well, which is an additional layer that we're gonna have to go through, would be great. So that's my TED Talk over and done with. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful, thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate it. We can work on this. As you know, some of the challenge around doing this work is a lot of it is free labor. So we will do our lifting where we can and put our emotional labor into it. And at other times we have to take a break to rejuvenate. But thank you for all the great points you've raised, and appreciate all the work you're doing for your project.
Sorry, can I just add to that? So Hijabi Ballers has a resource that we created for coaches mostly, but coaches, parents, who work with Muslim females in sport. And it's a bit of that is focusing on Ramadan and the issues or the barriers that might come up for athletes in Ramadan and how coaches can accommodate for that. It's available on our website, hijabiballers.com. But yeah, it's very short and it's not nearly, I mean, it's a start, but yeah, I think it's something that you can use in like classroom schools, whatever level where Muslim females engage in sport. But obviously Ramadan is not exclusive to females, but so there are lots of points in there that you can apply with like kids of all ages.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, both of those resources suggested by Amreen are also, the links are within the resource list we provided. So you can also check it out there. And thank you for sharing that. I'm going to read a couple of questions in the chat. Sorry, there's a lot of comments coming in, so I have to scroll up a little bit. So I hope I don't miss it. And then collectively, whoever wants to speak on which question. So one question is, how do we engage leadership on these types of issues in organizations such as OABO, CBOC, FIBA? These are, for those that don't know, different refereeing and basketball organizations at different levels. Another question is, can you speak to teaching people to critically think about what they see on TV and shows where Muslims are often shown as villains? And another question is, what's the recommendation for places outside of Toronto, like Ottawa, that don't have a wealth of Muslim-specific organizations to self-organize leagues, etc.? What difference can we make locally to an overwhelmingly non-Muslim basketball boards and organization? So I'll leave it at those three, and then if we have time, we'll take on more. So feel free to bundle your answers or take on any of those one questions.
I think that just to answer that question, outside of Toronto, for example, we need allies, right? We need people in those places that may not be Muslim, but feel, or may not be part of any cultural group or identity, but feel that this is important. They're going to be an upstander, and reach out to your local communities, or reach out to us, or reach out to anyone. And I'm sure we can try to figure out ways of how we can broaden the horizon for this kind of stuff. Also, just to go back to resources, I know in our board, York Region, there's a whole, 130-page document on every faith and what accommodations can be made for students and modifications for staff and parents. So I'll send that to Ardavan, and then he can, or at least the Ramadan and Muslim one, so that way you can see what things are being done on a school level, and then maybe even take things from that into our personal lives. And then the last question about what on a CBOC or ABO level. I think we're doing that on our officiating level. We're trying locally and provincially to dialogue and create policies. Ardavan's on the committee for diversity and inclusion, and
I think it involves some diversion, so that's okay.
And some diversion, sure, good save. And yeah, and then I know there's people that are taking this up to the FIBA level, right? And so it's a start. I mean, like Ardavan said, it's not going to happen overnight, but this is, one of the first steps where we have to talk about it and be open and honest about it.
I can add something if unless the other panelists want to go. No, okay. I think if like as a practical tip, if the people who are here in the audience today, especially the non-Muslims, whatever position of power you're in, think one level up, think people who are not on this call and you would want them to be, and take these resources to them. It would only, like our issues are only going to get solved when the people at the top realize what these issues are. And you here, whoever's on this call, you're a start. So take it up to the people who are above you, and it may be uncomfortable, it may be, you know, risky, but that is what you can do to help.
Okay, I'm just being cognizant of time. It's 8 o'clock. So any final word? We're sorry if we didn't get to your question. As I said, we're going to continue some of these conversations at our next event. Once it's finalized, we will promote it similarly to the different platforms. Any final words from the panelists? If you want to share something, I'll ask you to keep it short, but any final words?
I just want to thank Dr. Eizadirad and everyone who was involved in asking us to share our thoughts and experiences. And we're also learning, so we're not perfect. And so I think we're in this together. And hopefully when we look back a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, like Saif was saying, we make it better for future generations to come.
Thank you.
Just to go into what Farhan is saying, it's interesting when you're growing up through these situations where you just think it's the norm, that's the way it's supposed to be. So to see people trying to make change and being accepting it's great. And everyone that came out to listen, it's much appreciated.
Shout out to Ardavan. Thank you very much for putting this together. I think it's this concept of a brave space is definitely something that needs to be handled more, and looking forward to the other sessions that are upcoming.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this, Ardavan. And thank you to everyone who attended.
Yeah, definitely just want to echo the same thing. Thanks, Ardavan. Thanks everyone for participating, and salams.
All right, thank you, everybody. I will leave off by saying this work sometimes, you know, it's an uphill battle and it can be tiring, but when I find myself in those days or moments, I always tell myself, I might not be able to change the system today or in my lifetime, but I can change someone's world. So the students and the people in your life, you just got to start with changing one person's world, and that will have a ripple effect on everyone else. I know Adil is on this call. He is assistant coach of Simon Fraser, founder at DNUP, and he wants to share some things. So I'll turn it to him if he wants to say a few words. But if you have to go, we understand. And thank you for joining us. Adil?
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Really nice hearing from all you guys. You know, it was very informative. You know, thank you, Ardavan, for putting it together. I think my journey as a basketball player, basketball coach, you know, and I think one question that really stands out to me was the question that you were asking the panelists, was about what would be the advice I would share to my, you know, 16, 17, 18, you know, younger self. And I think, you know, from whatever I gathered from this conversation, whatever I learned, I think what I would share to myself would be really simply this: your struggle and your identity is your advantage. And we don't realize it as an advantage. A lot of people don't have struggles, and a lot of people don't have, you know, they fall in line with you know, the dominant identity. And unfortunately, and the reality is they don't have the same advantage as us. We have a chip on our shoulders. We can go a little bit further than others can. And, you know, as much as we, you know, as much as, you know, there's opportunities to, you know, identify, you know, gaps and, you know, accommodation and all that, you know, the reality is sometimes those gaps may never be addressed. But what we can do is, you know, put ourselves, you know, I always tell myself is like, you know, if you can't be friends with the politics, be the politics, you know, create a new wave, you know, and then be able to put other people on and be able to identify, you know, ways that we can, you know, address these inequities, these, you know, systematic barriers that, you know, prevent us from being able to be the best versions of ourselves, right? So that's what I would say. You know, that's been kind of like my motto throughout my life, is like, you know, my identity and my struggles, my upbringing, you know, those are my advantages, and I'm thankful for those.
Thank you for sharing. Adil was supposed to be on this panel, but due to time zone conflicts being in BC, it didn't work out, but we're going to try to capture your story in another platform down the road. So on that note, I want to thank everybody who took time during this pandemic, during these busy and difficult times, to be here. be part of the conversation, whether as a speaker or as a listener or as someone who shared resources. Thank you to all the panelists for sharing your positive and negative life experiences. I know it's not easy talking about it in front of people. And I think it's time for dinner. So have some good food, and I'll be in touch with you to follow up. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.